Hello and welcome to the FedNow Community Town Hall. I'm Jean Rourke from the Federal Reserve and I'll be producing today's webinar. Before turning the call over to our speakers, I'll run through a few logistics. Regarding your webinar connection, all attendees are automatically set up to access this event through the web stream option. If you experience audio issues, you're welcome to dial into the phone number, and that's posted on the webinar player page. Please note that if you dial into the phone line for audio, you'll need to select the phone option in the media chooser. And you can access the media chooser using the gear located at the top right corner of the speaker window. For optimal viewing, we recommend that you use Chrome, Firefox, or Edge as your web browser. If you need to expand the size of your slides, you can just use the Maximize button in the upper right corner of the slide window located on the webinar player page. We'll be taking audience questions during the webinar, and we'd love to hear from you. To submit a question, use the Ask a Question button, which is located on the webinar player page. And you can submit your questions anytime. It's now my pleasure to turn the webinar over to Vice President at the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, Cassie Quimby.
Thank you, Jean. Hi, this is Cassie Quimby, and I'll be your host today. We're so happy to be here with you for our second quarter FedNow Community Town Hall, and I want to thank you guys for taking the time out of your busy day to join us. We appreciate your continued engagement with the community, which keeps growing every day. I'm pleased to announce that we have over 1,300 members now as part of the community. I'd especially like to welcome all of our new members who have joined since the last time we met virtually in February. So welcome. All right, let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please. All right, first let's walk through our agenda for today. We'll start with a fireside chat with Dan Anthony, who's the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer of the FedNow service. During our discussion, Dan will lay out the vision and key pillars of the FedNow technology strategy. Then we'll hear from Frank Von Driesch, Assistant Vice President of FedNow Product Management, as he gives us a high-level overview of the recently released final ISO 20022 message specs and how organizations should start preparing for instant payments. Frank can make this specs discussion interesting, so I'm excited to have him present on that today to you guys. All right, next, Allison Baller, Vice President and FedNow Industry Readiness Lead, will share some highlights from the FedNow Pilot Program. To round out the topics, I'll share some insights from community members and preview upcoming engagement opportunities we have coming your way. Throughout today's webinar, you'll have multiple opportunities to share your thoughts with us. And before we close, we have time set aside for a Q&A session. We actually have a good amount of time set aside for a Q&A session with you guys live. As Jean mentioned already, if you have questions that are already top of mind, please go ahead and start submitting them now using the Ask Questions button. It helps us start to manage on the back end the order and allows us to get through questions as efficiently as possible. So we'd appreciate your help there in starting to have those flow into us. All right, so without further ado, let's get started. Dan Anthony, welcome. This is your first community town hall, and we're very excited to have you with us today.
Thanks, Cassie. I'm excited to be here and get the chance to talk with everyone about FedNow.
Excellent. All right, well, let's start with an easy one for you, Dan. You joined the Fed in your current leadership role fairly recently. Please tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to your work on FedNow.
Sure. So I'm from New Zealand originally. My accent's going to give that away at various points through this discussion, I suspect. My background is a decade or so in technology consulting in New Zealand, Australia, and the US, across a variety of industries, high-tech, government, media and communications, manufacturing, financial services. 10 years or so at Google and working with our enterprise products and dealing with some of our enterprise customers around the globe, as well as a couple of years in the startup world. so what brought me to FedNow? So I can recall the exact day I heard about FedNow and when my journey started. So I was living in New Zealand. I'd recently taken on a role as CIO of one of the largest companies in New Zealand. And I was driving back from the airport after a visit to Australia, listening to a technology podcast. And they were discussing the announcement of FedNow. And I immediately thought, this would be an amazing thing to work on. I'm never going to get to do it because I just moved to New Zealand and I'm literally on the other side of the planet. So, opportunity costs and all, but gosh, that would be awesome. Anyway, for personal reasons, we ended up moving back to Boston a couple months after that, and for a variety of circumstances, led me to FedNow, and of course, here I am. So, it's unbelievably exciting for me to be on FedNow, and exciting is probably a word you're going to hear me use a few times today. But the set of circumstances that got me here is, I feel very privileged to be part of FedNow.
Excellent. That's a good story. It all turned out the way it was meant to turn out, apparently, Dan, because here you are with us. So very cool.
That's the way I see it.
Who knew they were talking about FedNow in New Zealand? That's all I have to say. Okay. Let's jump into the technology vision for the FedNow service, because I know a lot of people in the audience today are very interested in hearing from you on this. So tell us, please, about FedNow's technology strategy and the factors guiding your approach to building the service. How does the approach benefit financial institutions and end users?
Yeah, so security, performance, and resilience are at the core of everything we do in the FedNow service. And those are the three pillars that are the center of every technology decision we make. So consistent with our goals of safety and efficiency for the U.S. payment system, we're really working to build a highly secure and resilient instant payments platform that's going to drive industry innovation in the near term and into the future. As we deliver that, we're employing agile delivery methodologies, which is to say iterative and collaborative development that produces regular working software and therefore gets feedback early and often. That agile development strategy, along with some operating models, gives us a number of benefits. It will allow us to narrow the timeline for the industry-wide initial launch and provide greater clarity there. It will allow us to release new features more quickly due to more frequent, smaller, and seamless, and by seamless I mean designed to be non-disruptive, technology updates, in addition to the more traditional, larger periodic updates. And that facilitates 24/7 operation. Additionally, our methodologies let us use industry-leading techniques like feature flags, blue-green deployments, which allow A/B testing of new versus old functionality, as well as the ability to turn features off and on. We also leverage automation, integration, and testing from the moment our engineers cut the first line of code to when it hits production, not just at the final testing phases. And this really allows us to offer options to financial services institutions that really include the ability to choose whether or not to use a given feature by virtue of being non-invasive and being able to opt into new features as and when they're ready for it. This lets us design a platform that has the flexibility to not only accommodate evolving technologies, but also the use cases that will emerge as you begin to see financial institutions and consumers and customers get access to the product. So, more broadly, we're going to put instant payments in the hands of more individuals and businesses. We'll support and drive emerging use cases, some of which we haven't even begun to see emerge. And we'll support the economic needs of the nation. And, you could see some pretty radical opportunities here for the nation. The order-to-cash cycle could be shortened from, 60 to 90 days as it is today to weeks, days, or even hours. And so you can see some pretty remarkable industrial innovation around the product.
Excellent. That's certainly an exciting vision, and the innovation that the service is going to enable is really hopefully going to be impactful for years to come. So very exciting. All right. Next question. We know a lot of planning has gone into the building of FedNow. Dan, is the FedNow service being built internally, or are you using external vendors?
The FedNow service is being delivered using a carefully selected tech portfolio. While we don't share details of the internal stack, we have made and will continue to make choices that are designed to achieve our goals for FedNow service, in particular time to market, security, resilience, performance, efficiency, innovation. And that lets us really focus on the features and the functionality and the capabilities of the product. What I can say is our technology decisions are based on a rigorous process, and we're brought in thinking and practices from a number of industries, high tech, media platforms, healthcare, financial services, et cetera. And those are anchored on agile delivery methods and practices. As I mentioned, our internal technology stack is proprietary and confidential, and that includes the identity of some of our technology service providers. However, we are using contemporary technologies and innovative, proven products that leverage software components as well as the learnings that power some of today's largest scale technology platforms across the globe. And that includes some of the sites that power millions, even billions of users around the world. As we think about delivering it, and I apologize, I'm going to lapse into a little bit of jargon here, the performance, the power, the resilience are delivered by components like in-memory processing, highly distributed processing, in-memory databases, NoSQL databases, machine learning, high redundancy and resilience components, virtualization, and where appropriate, cloud computing. I think from a product perspective, the technology strategy really blends Federal Reserve payments expertise along with some of these leading technologies that will deliver the scale and the flexibility that we expect out of the product.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan. All right. How will this technology strategy support 24/7 by 365 operation of the FedNow service?
Yeah, so I mentioned that resilience, safety, reliability are at the core of everything. So we are working to offer a service that is highly available and resilient. And a key part of that is distributed, replicated processing with redundancy, as well as a variety of operational tools and processes, such as self-healing technologies and SRE, so that's site reliability engineering. And site reliability engineering is the set of practices that are used to power some of the most sort of widespread and heavily used sites in the world. So you could think Google, Facebook, Amazon, in terms of some of the capabilities we're bringing. Additionally, those smaller, more frequent technology updates are designed to be non-disruptive and seamless and allow us to keep the technology platform up to date and forward-looking, and thus support 24/7, 365 operations.
Excellent. Thank you. Dan, we get this next question a lot, so I'm very excited to hear your response to this. How will financial institutions connect to the FedNow service, and what technology will be used to send payments and other messages?
Yeah, so in addition to building FedNow, we're also currently designing and developing the FedLine solutions that will support FedNow and provide access to it with the same high level of security, resilience, and reliability that our customers expect. Initially, FedNow will leverage IBM's MQI client for the payment message flows, which means financial institutions will need to integrate their core payment processing systems using the freely available IBM MQI client software over either their FedLine VPN device or their FedLine WAN router, very similar to the way they connect today to other Federal Reserve financial services. I do want to highlight API access to FedNow is an important part of the product roadmap, and as we finalize some of the solution details in that space, we'll provide more information to support planning and ensure ease of connectivity using APIs also.
Okay, Dan, you just mentioned that APIs or application programming interfaces will be an important part of the product roadmap. For those unfamiliar with APIs, can you tell us a little about how the service is going to leverage them?
I can. We're committed to fostering nationwide reach of instant payments. And as I mentioned, API access to the FedNow service is an important part of the product roadmap and that access to the service. So I'd like to take a step back for a moment. So an API is essentially a set of functions that lets applications talk to each other. So to simplify a little bit, an API delivers a user request to a system and then receives a response back to the user. So, for example, every time you send an instant message on your phone or you get a set of directions to a destination, you're using an API to do that. So FedNow is going to utilize APIs for a number of purposes. These could include reporting transaction details or status and daily activities. It could be providing downloadable information like message specifications. But I think the key point here is it's going to be a phased approach to incorporating APIs into the service. In other words, we will add more over time, which allows us to meet the market where it is today in terms of ability to consume and integrate with FedNow service, and also lead it to where it needs to be in terms of evolving technology trends. As we finalize those details, as I mentioned before, we'll make more information available to support planning and make sure we facilitate ease of connectivity.
Okay, thank you. Dan, as you know, we're on a community town hall, and our community is made up of several, a large number of industry stakeholders who are collaborating with us, working with us to support the development of FedNow. So from your perspective, how is the Federal Reserve working with the industry on FedNow development?
A timely question, since this audience is a key part of that. So we're obtaining ongoing insight from the 1,300 plus FedNow community members, as well as the more than 120 participants in the FedNow Pilot Program. Now the Pilot Program is in its advisory phase, where we're getting input to further define the service and adoption roadmap, industry readiness approaches, and overall instant payment strategy. This year, the program participants will start prepping internal infrastructure, connectivity, and processes for testing and implementation of FedNow. And ultimately, the pilot participants will help with extensive testing of the service to make sure that the FedNow service is ready for general availability in 2023.
Excellent. Dan, all right, I'm going to ask you one of my favorite questions. It's one we ask a lot. I think a lot of people will be interested in hearing your response to this one. What should financial institutions be doing now to prepare for the FedNow service?
Yeah, the former systems integrator in me loves this question. So I think it's important that financial institutions and partners begin to take steps now to make sure that they're able to use FedNow, when it becomes available. For FIs that currently outsource payments processing, you should be starting discussions with your core processors and service providers early, understand their roadmap and how they plan to support implementation of FedNow. Internally, you should be thinking about reviewing existing processing and accounting systems and thinking through the technical considerations and some of the operational implications of a 24/7, 365 environment. So this could include the ability to use the ISO 20022 spec that Frank's going to talk about, as well as enhancing risk prevention, fraud, compliance technology to accommodate sender screening and authentication, and just general operations. I think a particularly important task is going to be exploring opportunities for innovation and new product offerings, and determining how existing product offerings like online and mobile banking, along with the customer service support experience, may need to change to support instant payments. And finally, just more generally, becoming educated on instant payments and use cases, building awareness among stakeholders and staff, informing customers and bringing them on the journey about the benefits and use cases for instant payments will really help maximize the impact the FedNow service can have.
Awesome. What a great response. Thanks. You set us up, I think, without even necessarily knowing it, Dan. We'll have more information kind of interspersed throughout the rest of today's town hall that'll cover at least some engagements and content that we'll have coming out yet this year to help organizations prepare for FedNow, kind of along the lines of some of the things you talked about here. So thank you for that setup. It seems as though, just based off what we talked about today, you're adapting very successfully to the Fed. But I have to ask before I let you go from our fireside chat, after a couple of Boston winters, I'm wondering what you miss most about your New Zealand homeland.
Yeah, it certainly isn't the winters here that drew me to Boston. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to give you two answers to that. I miss having warm oceans that I can actually swim in without getting hypothermia, and I miss really good coffee. Like any good Bostonian, I am very much a Dunkin' Donuts man, but I very much miss the quality of coffee that you used to get back in New Zealand and Australia.
Well, I hear you on that one, I will say. At least the coffees I've had in Australia were really good, so I get it. All right, Dan, thank you. I'm sure community members listening in today are looking forward to having you answer some of their questions during our live Q&A. You can't leave yet, but you're going to get a little break after I ask you just one more question, which is, okay. We've actually had a couple of questions come in about what the Federal Reserve is doing to make sure that this technology is going to be available to all banks, including community banks, credit unions, and others. Wondering if you could just speak to that for a moment before you take a breather.
Yeah, that is a good question. So we're making design choices that ensure we meet the needs of financial institutions of all sizes. So, for example, allowing use of correspondent and service providers, as well as our engagement with the broader ecosystem to ensure readiness. The pilot program has representation from a diverse pool of financial institutions that includes processors, bankers, banks, and corporate credit unions, which, as we know, they're key to enabling customers. We're also going to have the ecosystem program in the second half of this year.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I'm going to hand things over to Frank Van Driech, who will introduce the recently released final ISO 20022 message specs and how community members can use the specs to prepare for instant payments. Before I hand it over to Frank, though, let me just remind everyone yet again, especially after you just heard Dan's answers to some of the technology strategy questions that I had for him. If you have additional questions that you want to get in there, please use the Ask the Questions button and start submitting those through, and we'll get them teed up for Dan a little later in this presentation. Okay, so with that, Frank, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Cassie. Shortly, I will provide an overview of some of the core aspects of ISO 2022 before explaining a little bit the FedNow team's approach that we followed when defining the ISO implementation guidelines. But before kicking things off, we would love to hear from our attendees today actually how they would assess their current knowledge of the ISO 2022 standard. Cassie, would you mind moderating the first poll?
Sure. Jean, let's please get our first poll question up. The question, when it does come up, is going to be, what is your level of expertise when it comes to ISO 20022? And your options are, I consider myself an expert with real-life implementation experience. I know enough to be dangerous. That's a fun one. Or I'm a newcomer but eager to learn. And I think, Frank, this will help you understand kind of the level of knowledge that we have today in our audience on the phone. So just
Absolutely.
Select one of your, you can't be more than one. You can only really be one here. So just select the one that best describes you, hit submit, and Jean will wait for you to let us know when the poll's closed and we have some results that we can show.
Hey, Kathy, I am still seeing results coming in, so I'm just going to hang out for 5 seconds or so and let a few more come in, and then I will display those results for you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, I'll say this in the meantime. I would select a C, frankly, myself. I'm not an expert on these specs, but I've seen your slides, Frank, and I think that even for a newcomer today, your presentation is going to be helpful. So, oh, good. And look at that. Our results are up, and I am among the many, 70%, who are eager to learn but still new to the specs. So, Frank, with that, I'll turn it over to you. Yep.
Interesting to see we have 23% dangerous individuals. They might bring some spice to the ISO discussion today with maybe some interesting questions. But I'm sure we have something of interest for everyone today, and I suggest we move to the next slide to remind us a little bit what ISO 2022 is all about in the first place. This is going to be a brief overview of the core of ISO 2022, and as you see there on the slide, ISO 2022 is a recipe to build standards. ISO 2022 is actually a standard or methodology that describes in 8 books, believe it or not, how to develop financial messaging standards in a future-proof way. So it is a standard that sets out how to build messaging standards. And maybe even more important is the center box there, is that ISO 2022 is focusing on the business side of things. It is a business standard that is underpinned by a 3-layered approach to message development that we can see on the bottom of the slide there on the left. And let's have a look at that to explain this a little bit in more detail, what that core concept means. So from the business layer, all ISO 2022 message development starts with the business layer, where the prime focus is on modeling the business. For example, modeling the payments business. In this step of the development, all payments processes are identified, registered, together with all the actors that might be involved in any aspect or any step of an end-to-end payment process. When there is a change in the industry, think, for example, the arrival of instant payment systems, industry experts will reassess that business layer and refine, if need be, to accommodate new processes, for example, related to faster payments, or new actors that might enter the payment space. So that is the first layer. Now, the second step is the message development process, is what we call the messaging layer, also referred to as the logical layer. And this is where the actual messaging and underlying data exchange needs are identified to support the business processes identified in the first layer. What actors need to communicate and what information they need to exchange to actually make payments happen. As you might have noticed, discussing the first 2 layers, I have not yet mentioned words like syntax or formats. Those only come into play when we look at the last layer, which is the physical or syntax layer. And only in that very last step of message development process, rules will be defined to translate the logical messages identified in the first 2 layers in a certain syntax. Now, this 3-layered approach is core to ISO 2022, and it makes the message development process future-proof. Today, the preferred messaging syntax is XML, but I'm sure some people on the line might already question that too. But we know that technological evolution in a couple of years, this might change. But if the preferred syntax changes over the years, then we do not necessarily need to rediscuss or reinvent the whole payments business, meaning the first 2 layers. We just need to redefine how to generate message formats in the new syntax. That's one of the core aspects of ISO 2022. If we now move to the right side of the slide, we see there another core component of the ISO 2022 standard, the business model, or also referred to as financial repository, where all the information is stored and safeguarded. That repository acts as a common reference. It's publicly available to all, either to use as a foundation to build your systems and solutions, or to use as a reference to link your systems, solutions, and data models to, with an overall goal to increase the mutual understanding in general. Now, there is a little example on the bottom of this slide to clarify all this, and you can see that there are many ways of identifying a party that initiates a credit transfer. Some communities will talk about the ordering customer, the payer, the payor, originator, initiating party, and this only are variations in English. Imagine if we would add some foreign languages to this. But from an ISO 2022 point of view, there is only one name to identify the party that pays an amount of money, and that is very tiny on the slide. It's the debtor. So this common terminology, and ISO had to find common terminology for everything in payments and broader in all financial messaging. That is common terminology that everyone eventually can relate to, and that is one of the big benefits of ISO 2022. But it's only one of the benefits, and if we move to the next slide, I would like to touch upon some other benefits of the ISO 2022 standard. So while the slide materializes, first box on the left, I'm not sure whether you can see the slide, I cannot see it yet, but ISO 2022 is an international standard that is being adopted globally as we speak. The adoption is mainly driven by market infrastructure initiatives, like the rollout of brand new faster payment systems. These brand new systems have committed to using ISO 2022. There's plenty of examples to choose from. The clearinghouse RTP, the new payments platform in Australia closer to Dan's house, the European Central Bank's TIP system, the Canadian, our neighbors to the North Canadian real-time payments rail RTR, and of course the FedNow service. Now at the same time, this was just about faster payment systems. We have seen many high-value payment systems announcing their intentions to adopt ISO 2022. Examples close to home, the Fedwire Fund Service and the Clearinghouse CHIP service have announced their intention to migrate to ISO 2022. The Canadian market will migrate their links payment system to ISO 2022. And there's many more examples in Europe and across Asia of systems that are either live already, in the process of rolling out, or have plans to adopt ISO 2022. Last but not least, from an international standard point of view, there has been the announcement of the rollout of ISO 2022 for cross-border payments by network provider SWIFT starting in November 2022. Yes, that is next year. And that will for sure give ISO 2022 another major boost as the globally recognized standard for payments. Now, there are many advantages in rolling out an international standard. Anyone, any financial institution or service provider with a global or regional presence will definitely benefit when different systems and solutions or markets are using the same standard. Anyone with an ambition of a more regional or global presence will see at least one barrier to market entry removed as standards are aligned. Moving to the box in the middle brings me to the data richness of the ISO 2022 standard. And when I refer to data richness, I'm not necessarily talking about the actual size of data that can be included with payments. Think, for example, extended remittance information. This is definitely an important aspect of ISO 2022. You can include a lot of data remittance information with the payment messages, but I personally believe that the data richness is more about the fact that the data is better structured. The quality of data that is being sent in payments will not only improve the processing of those payments in general, it will provide many opportunities for the development of innovative products and services based on that more granular nature and structured underlying data that different players can actually tap from. ISO 2022 facilitates interoperability. Well, I think you will agree that if we look at the two benefits we just covered, it's an international standard and a data-rich standard, but I'm sure you will agree that moving to a common standard will address many of the current interoperability issues where data is truncated or markets and communities need to define expensive workarounds to deal with data richness that might be present in one and not another standard. These will belong to the past when better structured data and aligned messaging standards make end-to-end payment and seamless experience. Moving to the bottom of the slide, we see the lower support costs. Obviously, ISO 2022 will lead to lower support costs. If we all move to the same XML-based standard, more off-the-shelf solutions will become available to help financial institutions, their customers, and service providers with their implementations. For a financial institution, if you run multiple operations across multiple jurisdictions, I'm sure you will agree that rolling out a single standard across solutions and business lines will allow you to optimize and streamline your internal processes and hence reduce your costs. And then finally, on the right side of the slide, the enhanced processing and reconciliation, it can serve a little bit as that common denominator of all the other benefits we discussed. A standard with a granular data structure commonly adopted across the world by more and more players in the financial industry, that will definitely positively impact the end-to-end processing and reconciliation by everyone involved in payments, whether it's the financial institutions, the payment systems operators, market infrastructures, or, and of course, the end customers. Now, as a community, if you want to reap all these benefits of moving to ISO 2022, and there's many more, this is just a summary, then you must respect certain rules and follow a strict approach to implementing the standard. And on the next slide, I would like to cover the approach that the Federal Reserve banks follow to implement ISO 2022, initially for the FedNow service. So how does one implement a global ISO 2022 message for a specific purpose? You can compare the process to peeling an onion, layer by layer. And with that, I do not refer to the crying that might happen when you peel onions. But if you look at the dark blue outer circle in this graphic, that represents the global ISO 2022 standard. For example, in this case, a customer credit transfer message, also known as, for those experts on the call, a PAX 008. This global customer credit transfer message caters for all credit transfer payments: high value, low value, urgent, non-urgent, individual, batch, wholesale wire, retail ACH, and now also instant. Now, as part of our FedNow service implementation of the standard, we obviously had to remove a couple of those layers to focus on a use of ISO 2022 for domestic instant payments. At the same time, so that's where we go to the next circle. Firstly, we looked at the work that was done by a group called the Real-Time Payments Group, or the RTPG, which is referenced on the left of the slide. This is an official ISO 2022 group that has defined best practices for use of ISO 2022 for domestic, instant, or faster payments. At the same time, however, we also considered a series of other best practices that are listed on the right side of the slide and actually spelled out on the bottom of the slide in a little footnote, that we were obviously focusing on ISO 2022 for domestic instant payments, but we closely analyzed some of other market practices defined by a group that is called the Global Payments Market Practice Group, or PMPG. They have defined practice on how to use ISO for domestic wire systems, which they refer to as their HVPS Plus guidance. They have defined practice for cross-border payments, CBPR Plus guidance. They've defined guidance for cross-border instant payments, IP Plus guidance. And we also considered draft implementation guidance that we had already defined for our FedWire fund service migration and the CHIPS implementation of ISO 2022. Now, the reason for considering all these practices is actually driven by the Federal Reserve Bank's holistic approach that we want to apply to implementing ISO 2022. And this I would like to explain a little bit in more detail, because I think it's a fundamental aspect of our implementation guidelines. Historically, communities have always been very good at applying what I would refer to as a silo approach to aligning standards across systems of a similar nature. For example, the FedWire Fund's proprietary messages used today are very well aligned with the clearinghouse CHIPS proprietary messages, and they are very well aligned with the SWIFT MT messages to increase the interoperability for wire transactions. As part of a holistic approach, however, we wanted to complement this traditional vertical alignment with a broader horizontal one and identify opportunities to align and harmonize our ISO 2022 implementations across the different payment systems that we operate. In this case, specifically, between the FedNow service and the FedWire Fund, the FedNow service and the FedWire Fund service implementations of ISO 2022. In order to reap some of the benefits we mentioned previously, we want to move into a direction of defining with and for the industry a harmonized payments data model that underpins multiple payments or payment systems. So that is the holistic approach that we not only look vertically but also horizontally across the payment system that we operated when we were setting these guidelines. Once we cross-check that aspect of our approach, we then fine-tune, moving to the next circle, our implementation guidelines to meet the U.S. domestic and FedNow service specific requirements, which is reflected in that other circle on the graphic, the FedNow service. And at this time, we started collaborating intensively with the clearinghouse RTP team in an effort to increase the compatibility of the FedNow service and RTP implementations of the ISO 2022 standard. We had a series of joint workshops with the RTP team to compare the ISO 2022 message specifications from a series of perspectives, message flows, to what extent we are using the same ISO 2022 messages to perform the same function across FedNow and RTP, or from a functional alignment or a data model alignment within those messages in common. So we worked for a couple of months with the clearinghouse RTP team, and we jointly determined that in general, message specifications are well aligned for the message flows in common. And that is reflected by the overlapping circles in the graphic. You do see that there are some differences, but most of it, the FedNow service and RTP circles overlap. This applies especially to the core message flows, such as the credit transfer message or the request for payment, the RFP. Minor differences are explained by inherent system differences. I mean, the FedNow service and RTP are different systems. Or by some of the additional content in the FedNow data model as a result of the industry requesting us to accommodate more future-oriented functionality at the start of the service instead of adding it later. Now, while these differences occur in some of the core message flows, we do not expect to cause them to cause important compatibility issues for financial institutions participating in both systems because of their optional character. For some more exceptional flows, for example, payment returns, there is some minor misalignment, and the FedNow team could learn and benefit from the maturity that the ISO standard has gained over the past recent years and from the experiences gained from earlier implementations by other systems. For these flows, financial institutions participating in both systems will be required to code differently to perform the same function. However, the impact is mainly related to non-core exceptional processes compared to the core messages where I said, as mentioned before, that these are very well aligned. Now, so far for the collaboration with RTP around ISO 2022, that, by the way, is still ongoing. Now, if we now return to the graphic, the final step is the dark green bubble that reflects the financial institutions and service solution providers that participate in or provide solutions for participating in the FedNow service as they define their own product offerings or service offerings within what has been enabled for release 1 of the FedNow service. So, as you can see, all the way to the lowest level of individual bank-specific or vendor-specific implementations, we always remain within that outer circle that reflects the global ISO 2022 standard. And by coloring inside those lines, meaning staying true to the ISO 2022 standard and implementing the messages in line with recognized best practice, we wanted to ensure we get the FedNow foundations right and make the service future-proof. With that, I would now like to provide an overview of where we are in the FedNow ISO 2022 program by showing you the progress we have made so far. So if we can move to the next slide. Okay, in the first half of 2020, the FedNow team developed draft ISO 2022 implementation guidelines within the team for all messages that were expected to support the FedNow service at launch in 2023. In July, we started the revision of those drafts with an industry group, a group of experts reflecting a broad representation of stakeholders from our community, small, mid-sized and large financial institutions, as well as processors, aggregators and service providers. They discussed, validated and reviewed the draft we provided ahead of kicking off the industry group. As just mentioned, we started the collaboration with the Clearinghouse's RTP team in October 2020. The draft specifications were then taken through a consultation of the FedNow community, and we do want to thank those of you that participated once again for your efforts and insights as you were revising these guidelines. We received over 250 comments from the community members, and many of those, together with some of the findings from the FedNow RTP collaboration, resulted in updates to our draft guidance with support from the ISO 2022 industry group as we were finalizing it towards the end of January 2021. At the end of March, we published the ISO 2022 message specifications for release 1 of the FedNow service, and on the next slide, I would like to share how you can access those FedNow message specifications if you haven't already. So, the ISO 2022 message specifications are publicly available on MyStandards, which is the platform that the Federal Reserve Banks have chosen to document and manage our implementation guidelines. You will need credentials to access the platform, but anyone can obtain these credentials. And all the documentation that has been posted so far is publicly available, and the platform also provides more tutoring tools and wealth of information. But focusing on what has been published from a FedNow service point of view, I would like to highlight that today, if you access, you can download the FedNow Service Implementation Guide, which offers a more business-oriented description of the ISO 2022 messages for FedNow Service. You will have access to the FedNow Service ISO 2022 message flows, and of course, you will have access to the ISO 2022 implementation guidelines for all messages in scope of release 1. And you can download these, you can browse on the web platform, but you can also download these in the format of your preference, whether it's a PDF, an Excel file, or an XML schema. This is only the beginning of the Federal Reserve Bank's offering through this channel, so we do want to reinforce the message to get your credentials to access the platform. And before we have a look at what we will be adding soon to the platform, we would like to turn again to you, attendees, to hear whether you are familiar with our recently released message specifications and whether you've accessed the platform. Cassie, could you take us through the next poll, please?
Yes, sir. Jean, let's pull that poll up here if you can. So the question is, when it pops up, has your organization accessed the FedNow ISO 20022 message specifications and or guidelines available on MyStandards? And I think, Frank, you would love to see 100% say yes. But if you say no, hopefully after this presentation, you will go take a look, and so we'll get to a not yet, not a no, maybe for B.
If the number doubles after this session, I'm happy to, Cassie.
That'll be success for us, right? The people have spoken. You did a great job with your presentation. Jean, do we have responses yet?
Yes, we do have a whole bunch of responses coming in, but they are continuing to come in, Cassie, so I'm going to give it another 5 to 10 seconds if that's okay.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's see what we get here. Be interesting to see how many people say I'm not sure. I guess it's an organization question, not a personal question. So okay, well we're split fairly evenly, Frank. So I'll turn it back to you for reaction here.
Okay, I mean, I'm going to focus not on the negative. I tend to be a positive oriented guy, but on the no, because I do hope that after today's session, the 43 listeners today will get their access credentials to the platform, because we're going to be using it more and more. So if we can move to the next slide, I would like to briefly touch upon what we're going to be doing next from an ISO 20 or 22 FedNow program point of view. To reinforce that message from the importance of the MyStandards credentials, I would like to start with the right side of this slide. I mean, in the third quarter of this year, so anywhere between July and September, we will be opening the MyStandards Readiness Portal to registered participants on the platform. And this is actually an online tool that is fully integrated with the MyStandards platform, where we have our guidelines, and it will allow anyone that has access not only to get message samples and payment use cases, but more importantly, anyone will be able to check their compliance of the messages they generate internally and test them against the FedNow Service ISO 2022 message specifications. So this is a self-service, 24/7 available online tool where you can check whether what you have coded is actually in line with what we have set as a message implementation guideline. So really important to get those access credentials. To the left side, the FedNow team is at the same time also working on developing an ISO 2022 educational program to increase awareness around ISO 2022 in general and help the industry as they prepare for rolling out the ISO 2022 message standards. With the move, we will all be learning a new language, and we realize that there is a lot of education to take place, and we will be releasing on a regular basis modular training opportunities on a variety of ISO 2022 topics. And with that, Kathy, I've reached the end of today's update on ISO 2022, but before closing, I do think that we have yet another poll, right?
That's right. All right, Jean, I'm going to need you to help me one more time here. The question, when it pops up, is going to say, what future ISO 20022 educational opportunities would you be interested in most to ensure your readiness for FedNow? And Frank just mentioned that we're going to be pushing out a lot of educational content in support of ISO 20022 throughout the rest of this year. And I think just to help us in our planning, getting a sense for whether it's business-oriented overviews that you value versus in-depth sessions that are a little bit more technical in nature versus training sessions on features of the MyStandards platform and readiness portal. You also have another option, option D. You are welcomed to use the moderated chat button to offer a little bit more flavor, especially if you answer option D, other. But if you have just any thoughts or ruminations about this topic or educational opportunities in general, please do drop them into that moderated chat. These comments will be visible to other members attending today, but it's a good way to get a little bit more color from you guys around things you value or you know, some topics that are kind of top of mind for you. Okay.
And Cassie, while we wait for the poll results, just going to add that, of course, in the current environment we operate, all trainings will be virtual, so we will have focused modules available, but we do hope that in the near future that we will have the joy of complementing that virtual offer with more in-person workshops or town halls.
Indeed. One day soon, Frank. All right, Jean, do you have results for us?
Yes, hopefully you'll see those results pop up. And if not, let me know and I'll let you know what they are.
Yeah, I don't see them popping up. My box went away, so you might just want to, oh, okay, they're up now. All right, I see 41% for business-oriented, 22% for more technical, in-depth sessions, and 36% asking just for training sessions on features of the MyStandards platform and the readiness portal. All right, so there's a 1% that answered other. Please do use moderated chat to give us your thoughts there. Anyone else, no matter what you answered, please consider using moderated chat to throw in any other thoughts you have. Frank, anything else from you before we close?
No, I would just say for the listener that the A and C answers are in the works, and as we get past these, then of course we will get into the more detailed training. So more to come, definitely.
Okay, excellent. And Frank, I'm sorry, I sounded like I was closing this and letting you relax here, maybe a little prematurely. I do have one question for you, and then you can go take a break after that. But the question is, from a consumer standpoint, what's in it for the consumer, or is FedNow just a benefit for financial institutions?
No, through the financial institutions participating in the FedNow service, business and individuals will be able to send and receive instant payments conveniently, for example, using their mobile devices. Recipients will have access to funds within seconds, giving them greater flexibility to manage their money. They will have certainty that payments were successfully processed end-to-end, flexibility to pay or be paid as a result of the 24/7/365 availability of the service. And not to forget that many of the ISO 2022 benefits that we discussed today, for example, the data richness of the standard, will also improve reconciliation from a customer point of view, and very likely lead to those new innovative products and services provided by financial institutions and other service providers that they are likely to benefit from. So it's definitely not only for the benefit of financial institutions. I think the consumers will benefit definitely from the service too.
Excellent. All right, thank you, Frank, for providing this overview today. Let me turn it over to Allison Baller now to provide an update on the FedNow Pilot Program. Allison? Allison, we can't hear you if you're on mute. Okay. Well, let me see, perhaps if we can't get Allison on, if we're having some difficulty with her connecting, perhaps we can
So Kathy, I checked in with the operator to see if she's still connected.
Yep.
We could see if Jesse is available.
Yeah, let's see if Jesse can pop on. We are ready for anything around here.
Yeah, I am available, and Allison, for some reason, said she's not on mute, but she's going to try to dial back in.
Okay, Jesse, so maybe you can go ahead and take the first slide here just to keep things moving along.
Yeah, just give me 1 second. And to orient myself, and I should be ready to go. Okay, great. So, nothing like a last-minute drill.
This is live, just in case anyone was wondering. All right, Jesse.
No worries, I'm ready to go. Okay, so for Pilot, we're committed to continuing our close collaboration with industry stakeholders. So the FedNow community and the pilot program are two critical components of our industry readiness strategy and approach. So we launched the FedNow Pilot Program officially at the end of January of this year. We have hosted our inaugural kickoff meeting, and we have welcomed about 120 participants to that program. So like us, participants are pleased at the range of organizations included in the program. We have a diverse group of financial institutions, processors of all sizes that are geographically diversified and serve different market segments. And they actually contribute a wide range of subject matter expertise, so we're very happy about that. So through the program, pilot participants have opportunities to engage in open dialogue with other organizations with similar interests and challenges, and to collaborate with the FedNow team as we confirm the service delivers features and functionality that are desirable to the market. So far, the program has progressed really well. We're really pleased. We have hosted regular sessions at least twice a month, and we have had excellent attendance at each of these sessions from all the segments represented in the program. So I would have to estimate that our attendance has been greater than 98% at those sessions, so that's really pretty impressive. Our initial focus for the pilot program has centered on foundational topics and deep dives on these topics, including some mentioned by Dan and Frank earlier in today's presentation. So one of our first sessions was on FedNow Release 1 features and service roadmap. We had a technical deep dive on connecting and integrating with the FedNow service. We had targeted sessions for service providers such as processors, bankers, banks, and credit unions who will be enabling customers who are onboarding to the FedNow service. And we also had a couple of deep dive sessions on ISO 20022 messaging specs for the FedNow service. And finally, one of our most recent sessions was on the FedNow Service Readiness Guide, which we have also previewed with the community members during the last town hall. So in terms of feedback from pilot participants, it has been very positive, and hearing perspectives of such a diverse group of participants has helped us identify opportunities to enhance our programming to ensure that everybody, regardless of size and role, have a meaningful engagement throughout the program. Also, as a result of the feedback and insights that we have received so far, we're in the process of identifying opportunities for additional industry education and engagement, and you'll hear more about these as the year progresses. In terms of the FedNow Service Readiness Guide that I mentioned before, it is an important educational resource and tool to support organizations on their journey to implement instant payment capabilities using the FedNow service. It is still under development, and we're actively refining it based on feedback and suggestions provided by the pilot group and the community, and we look forward to sharing it more broadly with you in early June. As the advisory phase of the pilot program progresses through this year, we will continue to share periodic updates with the community on our pilot program efforts as we refine our broader industry readiness approaches and continue to execute our industry education strategy. So, Kathy, I believe that Allison is back. I got a message from her, so I'd like to prompt her and see if she wants to take over at this point.
Okay. Can you hear me, Jesse and team?
Yes, welcome back.
Awesome. Thank you for stepping in, Jesse. Really appreciate it. So let's move on to talk a little bit about the ecosystem. So we hear from you loud and clear that you have strong interest in this broader ecosystem segment, and we are quite excited about it as well. This segment includes fintechs, retailers, service providers, and other enablers who will help us all realize the benefits of instant payments by developing and offering solutions as well as value-added services that are important to our mutual goal of creating a ubiquitous service. So we are making progress on the design and development of a more formal ecosystem program, which we will be kicking off in the second half of this year. And this will offer an opportunity for these types of organizations to actually take advantage of many of the benefits and convenience of instant payments through education and even some hands-on tools that we're looking at. So we are really excited because we are exploring several different tactics through the ecosystem program, including the potential to offer a sandbox. And as a matter of fact, regarding the sandbox, in April, we had an industry open call for interested organizations that have proven experience in building and offering a sandbox environment. And we received strong interest from the market for those willing to potentially partner with the Federal Reserve to help build or provide this environment. So in terms of a next step, we will be issuing a more formal RFI, and that will be sent to qualified participants. And as we evaluate these options and confirm our plans moving forward, we will make sure to keep you all up to speed on that. And then we will also be sharing details about other ways to engage, not only in the sandbox, where hopefully you'll be able to experiment, build new concepts, and test partner value chains and new business models against the FedNow service, but also will give you the opportunity to have access to additional education information as well. So we look forward to sharing more information the second half of the year around the ecosystem, but certainly offer to answer questions about this or other areas as we move forward. And with that, Cassie, maybe I'll see if there are any questions about that I can answer in the meantime. Allison, I have one question for you right now, and I know we have a bunch of questions coming in through our Q&A already as well, so more teed up later. But for now, we do have a question about how open source security software companies can engage with the Federal Reserve and ensure that their tech teams are included.
Okay, great. So this is an example of an ecosystem partner. So our ecosystem program will include fintech service providers and really other technology companies. So basically anyone that's not a non-financial institution that is interested in the FedNow service. So yes, that particular type of company can begin to engage with us and work with us in a collaborative fashion to provide valuable input on how your particular solution can extend and provide additional value-added services across the broader ecosystem. So we're looking forward to working with you on that. The other thing I just wanted to note is that, you know, we continue to believe that it's important to have an accessible, safe, and efficient payment system, which is core to our nation's infrastructure. So again, you know, as a community member, we will make sure that we inform you of these opportunities for ecosystem participant engagement as we finalize the plans moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Allison. I'm going to give you a break because I'm sure you're probably still stressed out from your connection issue before. And I'm going to transition us into what we've learned from recent community feedback and what our upcoming programming for 2021 looks like. After all you've heard today, I'm hoping that you're excited and ready to take a deeper dive and get even more involved with us. So we could move to slide 17. I want to talk a little bit about some of the community survey key themes that we heard from you. First, actually, and foremost, I want to express our appreciation to those of you, and there were several of you who took the time to respond to our survey last quarter. Certainly, we know you all are very busy and appreciate your taking the time to share your thoughts and priorities with us. It was a fairly lengthy survey that helps us in our planning for the year, but certainly took a little bit of commitment on your end, so thank you there. In our survey, we asked you to share your views and provide candid feedback about your experience so far as a community member, including what you'd like to see brought to the community this year and also how best to deliver that. One major message received from you is how important getting relevant, easily consumable content that meets your needs in the moment is to helping you prepare for FedNow. That makes sense, and we agree and will certainly continue striving to meet this need. Our goal is to really take your thoughts and priorities and enhance our approaches to address these good suggestions that you provided starting immediately. So hopefully you'll see some of these themes that I'll go over here in a little bit, just kind of high level very quickly. You'll start to see some of that really in our programming as early as today. All right, so let's move on to slide 18. Talk a little bit about some of the survey results, and I'm going to keep this fairly high level and quick. But I wanted to give you guys some examples of specific feedback we got and note how we're trying to address opportunities to enhance our approaches where we can. So in terms of content and meetings, nearly 90% of the respondents said that events like this town hall are helpful to them and meet their expectations, especially those tied to FedNow milestone announcements or those with a live Q&A session. And so we will be, you know, we're trying to provide these Q&A sessions, make them a little lengthier so you guys have a chance to have your questions answered, including even today. We also heard that there's a desire to receive materials in advance. You might have noticed that we put out our materials for this webinar yesterday, trying, you know, slowly but surely to address some of your requests. So thank you for that. Pertaining to the FedNow service roadmap, respondents prioritize information that will help drive and inform decisions, update key stakeholders, and prepare their institutions for implementation. Our content throughout this year is focused on helping to meet these priorities. We'll continue to keep you all as our audience in mind as we put out new information to assist you in your journeys to FedNow. We were also pleased with the reported rates of access to our news, education, events. We had close to 90% of our respondents state that they use our existing site and emails to access this content. We do, while we're happy with that, I do want to just state that we do have plans to continue to build out how we're offering our content, both the format and the channels throughout this year to ensure we're providing what you need in ways that are easy, flexible, and also interesting. Another opportunity pertains to education. Most respondents expressed considerable interest in content describing the impacts or implications of using the FedNow service. Allison just mentioned a few minutes ago that we're previewing the FedNow Service Readiness Guide with our pilot participants right now. And all of that valuable information, which directly addresses the needs you outlined, will be shared with you in early summer. We also heard some great suggestions for future content with about a 50-50 split between those who are interested in specific information about how to prepare for implementation and others interested in fundamentals and industry trends. Our goal is to meet needs across this broad spectrum, so please stay tuned. But we agree, and we're only kind of, further bolstered in our planning when we heard of your interests along these lines. We also learned that there's a need to educate customers and other key stakeholders by informing them about features and functionality. So we are working on some shareable content with onboarding details, timelines, and pricing as soon as it becomes available. And you guys will be seeing some of that start to roll out here yet this year. So while I'm just previewing here a few ideas to illustrate what's ahead, please know that we're working very hard behind the scenes to take in your preferences and tailor our program to meet your needs. I am very excited about what this year has in store and hoping that, again, you'll see your feedback reflected. All right, let's move on to the next slide, please, Jean, and talk a little bit about upcoming opportunities for engagement. I know there's certainly a strong interest in providing input and insights to support and influence the development of the FedNow service, which is great because we need you. So as shared by my colleagues already, we consider it critical that we actively engage with you all in the industry to ensure we develop a service that meets market needs at launch and beyond. This year, we're planning a variety of opportunities for you to engage with us, focus on understanding the service, and make preparations for instant payments within your organization. So this quarter, you'll have several voluntary opportunities to collaborate with us based on your interests, level of expertise, and available time. Not only do we hope you'll walk away from these engagements with a better understanding of our proposed instant payment capabilities, but we hope to gain more insight into your demand for certain requirements and which priorities would meet your business needs. So starting next week, we're launching an exceptions resolution management survey where we hope to gain a better understanding of your interest in exception resolution management for the FedNow service. So please take time to respond when you see that invitation go out. Also, be on the lookout for webinars on day one features for FedNow, our planned service roadmap, and a deeper dive into instant payments use cases, as well as a working session focused on fraud capabilities to better understand the desired capabilities for different types of transactions. So you see some of these items listed here on the slide in front of you to give you a sense for the scope of kind of just our nearer term plans. You can expect to hear more about these opportunities via the Community Weekly email that we know now for sure you all are accessing. And in the spirit of mutual interest in contributing to the success of FedNow, we do invite you to please come learn and share, and certainly we welcome your enthusiasm and collaboration. All right. With that, I think we're ready to kick off our Q&A section of our webinar. All right, so again, as a reminder, our goal is to get through as many questions as we can, but please remember you can submit your questions at any time by using the Ask question button you see there below your slide view. And let's go ahead and get started. All right, Dan Anthony, the first question is for you. And it is, how will FedNow take financial institutions to the next level for instant payments?
Yeah, so as a technologist, this is kind of one of the more exciting spaces for me. Instant payments are a new and critical space, and I think one where we anticipate is going to drive innovation and economic activity to enable the next 40 years of payments. FedNow is being developed to enable financial institutions of every size and in every community across the U.S. To provide safe, efficient payment services in real time, around the clock, 365 days a year, and 366 in LEAP. One of the main differentiators of FedNow are settlement, along with the customer experience. And both of those we expect will enable additional uses coming to market. From a tech perspective, performance, innovation, security are the foundational pillars of every aspect of the platform. And so with a reliable, high-performing platform, we anticipate that business innovation and adaptiveness will continue to shape the market, and the service will evolve to support rapidly moving business climate and the financial institutions that service it.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. Allison, let's shoot over to you. Next question here. When will testing and training be made available? Will companies get to opt in, or is this a required service they have to offer?
So, Cassie, in answer to that, we, as you know, have talked a lot about the pilot program. So those participants will be the first group to test and adopt the service over the coming months, but we are going to ensure ample testing opportunities in advance of the 2023 service launch for other interested players in the market. So more to come as we continue to share more specific details on the timeline, but all interested parties will have the opportunity to test as we move forward.
Thank you, Allison. All right, we're going to do a little bit of ping pong here. And Dan, I'm going to direct the next question to you. The question is, what kind of additional fraud monitoring system will you offer as part of the FedNow launch?
So we've very definitely heard from the industry about the importance of tools to combat fraud, and they will be offered at the launch of the FedNow service and augmented over time. So available at launch will include a transaction value limit for all transactions, as well as the ability for participating financial institutions to set lower limits, the ability to specify certain conditions under which transactions would be rejected, as well as reporting features and functionality, including the number of payment messages that were rejected based on the participant settings. And as I alluded to, we will continue to add to those capabilities over time.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. Allison, I'm going to give you the pricing question, and it is, what will the pricing structure look like for this service? So this is a popular question.
Cassie. It is. So the Federal Reserve has not determined pricing that will be applicable to FedNow, but the fee structure and schedule will be informed by the board's assessment of market practices around the time of implementation, and of course we will be publishing that in advance of the launch of the service. So stay tuned, more details to come there, but we don't have anything specific to share at this time.
I look forward to the day we do, Allison. Okay.
Me too.
Dan, next question's for you, and it's about machine learning capabilities. The question is, can you please speak more to the machine learning capabilities you'll be including in the FedNow system?
Yeah, so machine learning plays an integral part in operations, particularly in the SRE functions, the monitoring and automation that takes humans out of the equation and really facilitates 24/7, 365 operation and reliability. So that will be a key part. It's also a part of our quality program as we automate some of our testing and quality efforts. And you can imagine other areas within the FedNow service that are candidates for machine learning that we'll continue to explore and evaluate as we do all other technologies.
Thank you, Dan. Allison, next question I'm going to direct to you, and I think it's kind of maybe this is a helpful kind of fundamental question. So is FedNow more of a payment rail or a direct approach to introduce payments? Essentially, does this function the same as Zelle for P2P, for example? Allison, did we lose you?
Oh, nope, sorry, I was talking on mute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, I'll figure out the phone one day. So if the FedNow service is a new payment rail, and it will provide a safe and efficient instant payment infrastructure to support a range of use cases and benefits in support of FIs and their customers. It will allow interbank real-time settlement and will include clearing functionality, which allows banks to exchange information needing to make credits and debits to customers' accounts. So P2P will be a use case that eventually we roll out on the platform as a fast follower. So if you have any other questions or follow up on that, happy to answer them, but hopefully that covers it.
Perfect. Thanks, Allison. Frank, I have a question here for you. The question is FedNow planning to integrate with other payment systems like SEPA Instant?
So the scope of FedNow service really is one is U.S. domestic. So if the question is whether we will be connecting with a European system that operates under the SEPA Instant scheme, then the answer is no. Now, however, from a standards point of view, and I did touch upon it during the presentation, I can confirm that some of the aspects of non-U.S. domestic initiated payments, for example, a payment initiated in Europe, have already been incorporated on an optional basis in our guidelines, and you might remember that was on the request of our industry group, as they prefer to cater for things that will be enabled or might be enabled in the future from day one, instead of adding them later. And we also, I mean, from to the European instance, we also closely collaborate with international communities, not only the European one, and faster payment systems operators as they discuss rolling out additional features and define best market practices for use of ISO 2022 messages to underpin those features, because it's often easier to be around the table when they start setting market practice than coming later to the game and asking them to change a market practice. So connecting not, but we're definitely monitoring and catering for future functionality.
Thank you, Frank. All right, Allison, next question's for you. Can a bank use a processor to participate in FedNow payments? If so, how does this work for settlement? Does the bank have a FedNow account that has to be funded daily? And essentially, I guess really let me restate this question. Can a bank use a processor to participate in FedNow payments, and maybe at a high level, how does this work?
Perfect. So FIs can use processors to access and utilize the service. Settlement will take place in the participating FI's master accounts, which are held at the Federal Reserve banks, or in the master accounts of their correspondents.
Thank you, Allison. All right, next question. I'm going to shoot it back over to Frank. Frank, the question is, do you plan to provide a mapping guide to help participating financial institutions understand the differences or nuances between the FedNow ISO 20022 variant and the RTP ISO 20022 variant?
Okay, I think I'll just clarify. We as mentioned, we keep collaborating with the RTP team. We have detailed comparisons, so not mapping, that's a slight distinction. So comparing how a message has been implemented for the FedNow service, comparing that to how it's been implemented for RTP. And we actually are discussing with the RTP team to jointly provide a comparison document that will document the differences for all the messages that we have in common. We are waiting though, as they are finalizing the next release. We want to base that comparison on the latest available version of their implementation, but it is our intention to indeed publish a comparison between both implementations.
Okay, thank you, Frank. All right, next question. I'm going to shoot it over to Allison, actually. Allison, are you still accepting new participants for the pilot program?
So unfortunately, at the moment, we're not adding to the number of participants in the pilot, but we may have additional opportunities for participation as we progress into the testing phase of the program. So stay tuned for that. Also in the meantime, we have a lot of roundtables, working groups, we have surveys, a bunch of different opportunities to engage through the FedNow community. And we also would encourage you to follow up with your account execs if you have, particular interest about becoming an early adopter of the service. And you can find the link to your account exec on the website. So if you have any questions there, just reach out, but hopefully that will get you started.
Okay, Allison, thank you. All right, we're getting close here to the end. So one more question, Dan, that I see in the list that I can direct to you. Will the FedNow service also provide real-time OFAC screening?
Yeah, so the Reserve banks will not screen transactions for participants for sanctions compliance in real time, and we're not able to provide guidance to prospective participants about their own OFAC obligations. We do suggest you consider consulting legal counsel for further guidance on how to handle that.
Okay, thank you, Dan. All right, we are winding down here to the end of our time. I see a question here that I think I can answer, so I will just ask it and answer it myself. The question is, who is a good person to reach out to if I have specific questions regarding how FedNow service will affect my bank or my financial institution? So I'll say, really, probably as a financial institution, your first stop should be your account executive. If you don't know who your account executive is, you can easily go online and find the name of that person. If you go to frbservices.org, contact us. Contact us in the upper right of the website, and on there you can enter your ABA number to find your account executive. That person, who is very nice, will, because we hire them and ensure that they are, will reach out to you and be well-versed in FedNow and able to talk with you about any questions that you have. If you don't know who your AE is, you can't find the contact us site or link, please feel free to use our community mailbox. You have that. It's in all of our messages to you. If you send a note that way, we'll be sure to connect you there. All right. With that, I want to say thank you very much. We appreciate your time today. We certainly have a lot ongoing. We know you all probably have a lot going on in your organizations too to prepare for FedNow and our 2023 release time frame. If you have any other questions that weren't answered today, again, please feel free to use the community mailbox to answer those. And with that, I will say thank you very much to my co-presenters, and I'm very excited to continue conversing with you across the number of engagements that we noted for you today. All right, with that, Jean, I'll close out.